My friends, every great movement in history began not with an empire, not with a government, not even with a corporation, but with a single person who dared to think differently. A farmer in a small village who refused to accept that poverty would be his inheritance. A teacher who believed the classroom was not just four walls, but the birthplace of leaders. A mother who worked 3 jobs, yet raised children who went on to change nations. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because they thought beyond their circumstances. This is the secret of greatness, not wealth, not fame, not connections, but the courage to think like a billionaire while acting like yourself. What do I mean by this? A billionaire doesn't think in terms of scarcity. They think in terms of abundance. Where others see problems, they see opportunities. Where others see walls, they see doors. And yet, the most powerful billionaire mindset is not in money. It is in vision, in perseverance, in faith. But here is the truth. You don't need their bank account to have their mindset. You don't need to wear their suits or walk their stages or own their buildings. You already carry something priceless inside of you. Your authenticity, your story, your scars, your struggles, your faith. That is your wealth. That is your identity. My friends, perseverance is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to keep walking when your legs are weak. Change is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to take the step even when your heart is trembling. Belief in a better future is not naivete. It is the most powerful force on earth, because when you believe, you ignite courage not only in yourself, but in everyone watching you. The question is not whether you can rise. The question is, will you rise? Will you refuse to bow to despair, to excuses, to the lie that says you are not enough? Will you take responsibility for your destiny, not waiting for rescue, but becoming the rescue? Think like a billionaire. Think of impact, of legacy, of solutions, but act like yourself, because the world doesn't need another imitation. It needs your authenticity. It needs your unique fingerprints on history. And so I leave you with this charge: rise up. Break free from the limits of small thinking. Live as though your dreams are valid, because they are. And remember, the greatest wealth is not in what you have, but in what you give, not in who you copy, but in who you choose to become. Think like a billionaire, act like yourself, and watch the world change, starting with you. When we hear the word billionaire, our minds instantly go to private jets, mansions, yachts, and endless luxury. We imagine the kind of wealth that seems unreachable for most of us. But let me ask you a question. What if I told you that billionaire thinking has nothing to do with money? What if the greatest billionaires in history were not the ones with the largest bank accounts, but the ones with the largest vision? Think about it. Money is only a tool. It can buy comfort, it can buy convenience, but it cannot buy purpose. It cannot buy vision. It cannot buy the strength to get back up when life knocks you down. What makes a true billionaire is not how much they have, it's how they think. And that is a mindset you and I can both carry. I want you to imagine a young child growing up in a poor neighborhood, no opportunities, no resources, no privilege. That child doesn't even know what wealth looks like. But in his mind, he believes, one day I will build something that outlives me. He studies harder. He dreams bigger. He refuses to settle for what life has handed him. That child is already a billionaire in his thinking, because he sees possibilities where others only see limits. That's the difference. A billionaire mindset is not about counting dollars. It's about counting opportunities. Where most people see problems, a billionaire mindset sees solutions. Where most people see risk, a billionaire mindset sees reward. Where most people see scarcity, there's not enough for all of us. A billionaire mindset says there's more than enough if we are willing to create it. And let me tell you something. Some of the wealthiest people you will ever meet may never be listed on Forbes. They are school teachers shaping the minds of future leaders. They are single parents raising strong children against all odds. They are small business owners who refuse to give up even when everything is stacked against them. These are billionaires of vision, billionaires of perseverance, billionaires of courage. True wealth is not measured in what you have, but in how you think. And that means every single person listening to me right now has access to it, because thinking is free, dreaming is free. Expanding your mind beyond your circumstances costs nothing but courage. Now let's break this down. Billionaire thinking means abundance. It means that instead of asking, what can I get? You ask, what can I give? What can I build? What can I contribute? The richest legacies in the world were not built on taking, they were built on giving. You remember the people who gave their vision, who gave their ideas, who gave their inventions, who gave their lives to something greater than themselves. Billionaire thinking also means resilience. The wealthiest people you admire are not the ones who never failed. They are the ones who refused to stay down. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper job because he was told he lacked imagination. Imagine that. Today, his imagination has built an empire worth billions. That is not the story of a rich man. That is the story of a resilient mind. And then billionaire thinking means possibility. It means that when you look at your life, you don't see what is missing, you see what can be created. Most people are trained to think in limits. I can't afford this. I'm not good enough. I'll never reach that level. But billionaire thinkers ask different questions. They say, how can I afford this? What skills do I need to develop? What steps can I take to get there? They don't accept the ceiling, they break it. You see, if you strip away the money, the cars, the homes, and the fame, what remains? The mindset, and that mindset is what built everything else. That is why some people can lose everything, and within a few years, they rebuild it all over again, because their wealth was never in the money. It was in the way they thought. I want you to grasp this truth today. The most important economy is not outside of you, it's inside of you. Nations may rise and fall, banks may close, jobs may disappear, but your ability to think, to create, to dream, to imagine, to innovate cannot be taken away. That is billionaire wealth. So when I say billionaire thinking is not about money, it's about mindset, I am reminding you that you already carry the seed of greatness inside of you. You don't need to wait for permission. You don't need to wait for resources. You don't need to wait for approval. You simply need to shift how you see yourself and how you see the world around you. Because once you change your mind, your life begins to follow. Once you expand your thinking, your reality begins to expand with it. And the wealth that you thought was unreachable begins to reveal itself. Not because it suddenly appeared, but because you finally had the mindset to see it. Greatness has never started with those who were already at the top. It has always begun with ordinary men and women who dared to think differently. Ordinary people, just like you, just like me, who refused to let their conditions define their conclusion. They chose to see life not as it was, but as it could be. And because of that choice, they became extraordinary. Think about history. Every invention, every movement, every breakthrough we celebrate today was born from someone the world considered ordinary. A young woman named Rosa Parks, just a seamstress, tired after a long day's work, sat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she wasn't a politician. But in that moment, when she refused to give up her seat, her ordinary decision to resist injustice sparked an extraordinary movement that changed the course of history. Ordinary people, when they think differently, can ignite revolutions. I want you to consider Thomas Edison. He was a boy who struggled in school, even labeled as difficult and slow. His teacher once told him he was too stupid to learn anything. Imagine that. But Edison thought differently. He didn't see his failures as final. He went on to create over 1,000 inventions, including the light bulb, which still illuminates our lives today. One teacher saw an ordinary failure, but Edison saw an extraordinary possibility. You see, what separates the extraordinary from the ordinary is not status, money, or talent. It is a mindset. Ordinary people settle for what is. Extraordinary people dream of what could be. Ordinary people wait for change. Extraordinary people become the change. Let me bring this even closer. Many of us look at our lives and say, I'm just one person. I don't have resources. I don't have influence. I don't have what it takes. That is the lie that keeps you ordinary. But the truth is, you are only ordinary until you begin to think differently, until you begin to ask, what if? What if I try again? What if I start this? What if I believe that my life has meaning beyond survival? History remembers those who dared to ask, what if? Consider Nelson Mandela. For 27 years he sat in a prison cell. He had no army, no wealth, no throne. He was in every sense an ordinary man behind bars. But while others saw prison as the end, Mandela thought differently. He used that time to sharpen his vision, to prepare his heart, to see freedom even when he lived in chains. When he walked out, he didn't just walk into freedom. He walked into destiny. He became the leader of a free South Africa, not because he had extraordinary privilege, but because he had extraordinary vision. And here is the truth. You don't need to be born extraordinary to make an impact. The mother raising her children with love and discipline is extraordinary. The young man working 2 jobs while studying at night is extraordinary. The person who forgives when they could hold a grudge is extraordinary. The act of thinking differently transforms the most ordinary situation into something remarkable. Extraordinary people are not the ones who never face pain. They are the ones who transform their pain into purpose. They don't allow rejection to make them bitter. They use rejection as redirection. They don't allow failure to break them. They use failure as fuel. They don't see themselves as victims of circumstance. They see themselves as vessels of possibility. So I ask you, what makes you think you are ordinary? Who told you that lie? Was it your environment, your background, your mistakes, your critics? Understand this: every extraordinary life you admire was once ordinary. The difference was in the way they thought. They refused to accept limits. They chose to think differently. And this is the calling for you today: to stop living as if you are average and to start seeing yourself as the seed of something extraordinary. Because inside you is the potential to transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you. Inside you is the potential to build, to create, to inspire, to lead. The only thing standing between the ordinary you and the extraordinary you is a shift in thinking, a new perspective, a decision to believe that your present does not determine your future. There is a deep truth that most people spend their whole lives running from, and it is this: you will never truly succeed trying to be somebody else. Authenticity is greater than imitation. The world does not need another copy, another clone, another echo. The world needs your voice, your story, your uniqueness. So many people spend their lives chasing shadows, trying to fit into molds that were never designed for them. They imitate the style of others, the path of others, even the dreams of others, hoping that by becoming a replica, they will also inherit success. But here is the problem with imitation: no matter how hard you try, you will always be second best at being someone else. Yet you will always be the best at being yourself. Think about fingerprints. Billions of people on this earth, and not a single fingerprint is the same. That is not a mistake. That is not a coincidence. That is design. You were created with something so unique, so unrepeatable, that no one can duplicate it. And yet, too often we trade that uniqueness away because we believe imitation is safer, more acceptable, more likely to succeed. Let me tell you a story. There was once a young man who admired a great singer. He studied him, memorized his tone, his mannerisms, his style. And when he began to sing, the crowd clapped because he sounded just like the man he admired. But when the real singer stepped onto the stage, the crowd forgot the imitator, because no matter how close he came, he was never the original. The imitator lived in someone else's shadow, while the original left a legacy. That is how many people live. They sound like someone else. They dream like someone else. They plan like someone else. But the danger is this: the more you imitate, the more you erase the very gift you were born to give. Authenticity requires courage. It is easy to imitate, but it is hard to be yourself in a world that constantly pressures you to conform. It is hard to stand in your own identity when everyone else is telling you, be like this, act like that, walk this path. Yet the people who change the world are not those who blended in. They are those who stood out. Look at Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, she was told she didn't have the look for television. She was encouraged to fit into a traditional news anchor mold. But she chose authenticity. She embraced her natural style, her deep empathy, her conversational approach. And by being herself, she didn't just succeed, she transformed the entire television industry. Think of Steve Jobs. The world told him to build products the way everyone else was building them. But Jobs believed that design, simplicity, and beauty mattered. He refused to imitate the competition. He chose authenticity and vision, and in doing so, he revolutionized technology. History is filled with examples, and yet the principle remains the same: authenticity creates legacy. Imitation creates limitation. But let me make this personal. You may think, I don't have the platform, I don't have the resources, I don't have the influence. That doesn't matter. Authenticity is not about where you are, it's about who you are. A mother raising children with love and values is authentic. A student who refuses to cheat even when everyone else does is authentic. An entrepreneur who builds with integrity rather than shortcuts is authentic. These choices may not make headlines, but they shape destinies. The question is, will you choose to embrace who you are, or will you settle for being a shadow of someone else? The temptation to imitate is strong because imitation feels safe. If someone else's way worked, then surely copying it must guarantee success. But what if their path was never meant to be yours? What if your design carries a solution that imitation will only bury? You see, authenticity attracts trust. People can feel when you are being real. They may admire imitation for a moment, but they are moved by authenticity for a lifetime. When you speak from your heart, when you live from your truth, when you act from your genuine values, people are drawn not to the polish, but to the realness. This is why authenticity is greater than imitation, because imitation can get applause, but authenticity earns impact. Imitation can win attention, but authenticity wins legacy. Every single person listening right now carries something the world has never seen before. A perspective, a talent, a way of thinking, a life story that is unmatched. The tragedy is when you bury it under layers of imitation, hoping to be accepted, when all along the world was waiting for the gift only you could bring. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It is not something handed to you on a silver platter. Destiny is shaped by the decisions you make, the responsibility you accept, and the perseverance you are willing to endure. Perseverance and responsibility together create the path to destiny. Perseverance alone is not enough. Responsibility by itself is not enough. But when you combine the two, when you refuse to quit, and at the same time take full ownership of your life, you set yourself on an unstoppable course toward the future you were created for. Think about a seed. When planted in the soil, it doesn't instantly become a tree. It faces darkness, pressure, storms, and drought, but it perseveres. And yet, even if the seed has the strength to grow, if the gardener refuses to take responsibility, if no one waters it, nurtures it, protects it, then that seed will never reach its full destiny. Growth requires both perseverance and responsibility, and so does life. Look at the life of Abraham Lincoln. He failed in business. He lost the election. He battled depression. Many would have quit after the first setback, but Lincoln persevered. And not only did he persevere, he took responsibility for a divided nation. He didn't wait for someone else to solve the crisis of slavery. He stood up, and his perseverance plus his responsibility shaped his destiny as one of the greatest presidents in history. Responsibility means owning your story, not blaming others, not waiting for rescue. Perseverance means standing tall even when the storms come. Put them together and you become unstoppable. There is a young student who grows up in a poor community where no one has ever graduated from college. She studies by candlelight. She works part-time jobs. She faces discouragement from those who say, people like us don't go far, but she perseveres. Yet perseverance alone isn't enough, so she takes responsibility. She applies for scholarships. She seeks out mentors. She sacrifices distractions for discipline. That combination takes her from being just another statistic to becoming the first in her family to graduate, changing the course of generations. This is the equation of destiny, perseverance plus responsibility. You can persevere all your life, but if you refuse responsibility, you will remain stuck. And you can accept responsibility, but if you give up at the first obstacle, you will never arrive. The two must walk together. Most people live blaming. They blame their parents, their environment, their leaders, their circumstances. But blame is the enemy of destiny. As long as you blame, you give away your power. Responsibility says, it may not be my fault, but it is my fight. It may not be my choice, but it is my challenge. And I will own it. That is when transformation begins. Perseverance is what keeps you moving when the journey is long. Responsibility is what ensures you are moving in the right direction. One without the other is incomplete. Together, they are destiny. Look at Thomas Edison once again. Over 1,000 failed attempts before he produced the working light bulb. That was perseverance. But at the same time, he took responsibility for his vision. He didn't wait for others to create what he imagined. He owned the process. He embraced the burden. And his destiny was fulfilled in bringing light to the world. Consider Nelson Mandela. He persevered through 27 years in prison. But when he was released, he didn't say, it's someone else's turn to fix this nation. He took responsibility. And his perseverance and responsibility collided with destiny to give birth to a new South Africa. Even in the smallest acts, this principle is alive. A father who works long hours to provide for his children perseveres, but when he also takes responsibility to guide, teach, and love them, he doesn't just raise kids, he raises leaders. A business owner who perseveres through setbacks, but also takes responsibility for his employees and community doesn't just earn money, he builds legacy. So many people want destiny without discipline. They want success without sacrifice. They want greatness without responsibility. But destiny does not come to the careless. Destiny does not come to the lazy. Destiny comes to those who persevere and take full ownership of their calling. The way you think determines the way you live, and the way you live determines the legacy you leave. If your mind is trapped in scarcity, your life will be limited. If your actions are rooted in imitation, your impact will be shallow. But when you think abundance, act authentically, and live purposefully, you position yourself to walk in the fullness of what you were created to become. Let's begin with abundance. Abundance is not about possessions. It is about perspective. A person with a scarcity mindset looks at a pie and says, "There's not enough for everyone. If you get a bigger slice, I'll get a smaller one." But a person with an abundance mindset says, "If there isn't enough pie," scarcity locks you into competition. Abundance unlocks collaboration. Scarcity says, "I can't." Abundance asks, "How can I?" The greatest leaders in history thought abundance when everyone else thought scarcity. When Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and declared, "I have a dream," he wasn't speaking from scarcity. He didn't see a divided America as an impossible wall. He saw a future of possibility where justice and equality could flow like rivers. His abundance of vision created hope for millions. Now think about authenticity. We live in a world that constantly pressures you to perform, to fit in, to play a role. But acting like someone else will never lead you to your destiny. Acting authentically, standing in your truth, living from your values, honoring your uniqueness, that is where true influence is born. People are drawn not to perfection, but to realness. They may admire imitation, but they follow authenticity. Consider Mother Teresa. By the world's standards, she had nothing, no wealth, no power, no fame when she began her journey. But she acted authentically. She embraced her calling to serve the poorest of the poor, to show compassion in a world of indifference. And because of her authenticity, she became one of the most respected figures of the 20th century. Her life proved that authenticity has a power imitation can never touch. And then, living purposefully, purpose is the compass of destiny. Without purpose, life is just movement without meaning. You can be busy and still be empty. You can be successful and still be lost. Purpose gives direction to abundance, and it gives weight to authenticity. It tells you not only who you are, but why you are here. Think of someone like Elon Musk. Whatever you think of him, his life is driven by purpose. He is not simply building cars or rockets. His stated purpose is to push humanity forward, to expand our vision of what is possible. Purpose is what fuels him to take risks others would never attempt. Without purpose, even abundance and authenticity can drift. With purpose, they find alignment. Now let's put these three together. Imagine a young woman growing up in a small town. She is told opportunities are limited. That's scarcity thinking. But she chooses to think abundance. She says, "If opportunities don't exist here, I will create them." She begins a small business, not to copy someone else, but to act authentically, using her unique gifts and passions. And as she grows, she doesn't just chase profit, she lives purposefully, using her business to uplift her community, to mentor young people, to create jobs. That combination, acting authentically and living purposefully, transforms her from an ordinary individual into a force of influence. This is the pattern of greatness. When you think abundance, you stop being limited by what you see and start being empowered by what you believe. When you act authentically, you stop chasing shadows and start casting your own light. And when you live purposefully, you stop existing day to day and start building a destiny that will outlive you. My friends, we have walked together through truths that can transform not just a life, but a generation. We have seen that billionaire thinking is not about money, but about mindset. That ordinary people become extraordinary the moment they choose to think differently. That authenticity is greater than imitation, because the world doesn't need another copy. It needs the real you. That perseverance without responsibility is incomplete, and responsibility without perseverance is powerless, but together they lead to destiny. And that the formula for a life of impact is simple but profound. Think abundance, act authentically, and live purposefully. The question before you now is not whether these truths are real. They are. The question is whether you will rise and embrace them. Will you dare to think bigger than your environment? Will you have the courage to be yourself in a world that pressures you to conform? Will you take responsibility for your life and persevere through the storms? Will you choose to see life not as scarcity, but as abundance, not as imitation, but as purpose? Your destiny is not waiting for someone else. Your destiny is waiting for you, and the world is waiting for the light you carry. So rise in your thinking, rise in your authenticity, rise in your responsibility, rise in your purpose, because when you rise, others will rise with you. Think like a billionaire, act like yourself, live with purpose, and watch the world change because you decided to change first.